Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's class. We will be doing a business process reengineering case study that was done at Honeywell. I hope all of you are doing very well. So this, case study, I think anybody who takes the case study, it is very important to know what business process and reengineering is. And we covered that in our last class. Now, before I move on and talk to you about the case study today, there are two main things that are very important, two key lessons from this case study that are very important. And so I want to touch on them before we kind of dive into the case study. And the first one is that if anybody wants to do business reprocess engineering or a BPR in their particular organization, then in that case, it's very important to make change plans in advance and then do those BPR projects. It does not make sense to just kind of do a BPR project just randomly. It is very important to plan for it. Number two, whenever a change happens in an organization, especially a big change, it is extremely important for top management to make that change a priority and communicate the vision across the organization. So before any change happens, rather than management working in a silo, it's extremely important that the vision of why the change is happening and what is that it is a high priority that is communicated throughout the organization. So now that I've kind of covered the two kind of high level, important strategies that are required to do successful BPRs in an organizations, in any organization, I'm now going to start talking to you a little bit about the case study today. And, Honeywell is a very large organization. It is known for, making a lot of industrial goods, also a lot of systems, manufacturing systems. So, they have involvement in making smart equipment of various sorts that is used in factories. Now, for today's case study, we are going to be focusing on one of Honeywell's plants that is based in Arizona. And at this particular plant, something known as TDC 3000X systems were being produced. And the whole idea of these systems was that if used in a refinery or a chemical plant or a paper mill, this particular system would help control processes. So this is basically what was being made in the plant in Arizona at Honeywell. And this case study dates back to, all the way to 1989. And at that time, what happened is that there were some issues in this factory. One of the big issues was lagging performance. So there were some performance issues. And so in 1989, the company decided to really make a manufacturing program and examine exactly, what's going on with regards to this lagging performance. What are the issues? And, there were several issues, but they really kind of narrowed it down to three main things. And they made goals to reduce each of the three main problems that they had. The first one was a lot of defects. So at Honeywell, they said that they had a goal to reduce defects by 1,000%, huge amount. The next thing that they said was they wanted to reduce the cycle time or the time it was taking to make a good, one particular system, for example, the total time it was taking by 500%. And finally, they wanted to improve their material management. So these were the three goals, the three main issues that they kind of discovered and that they said that they wanted to fix. Now, what they did was that all of these three goals, all of this program that they started initiating and implementing, from 19, this basically came under the umbrella of world-class manufacturing. So that's what it was known as, world-class manufacturing. And this was a program that they rolled out. And in order to do this world-class manufacturing, they first, gathered a lot of data. So they really gathered 3 years of data. And in 1989 was when they kind of, developed these goals under this world-class manufacturing program. Now, they had these goals, but they also had some objectives in mind. The first one was developing a focused factory environment that harnessed the potential of teams. So, one of the key objectives was that, look, to really create an environment that they could really get the best out of their teams, they could really increase their productivity of their teams. Another big objective was that any resources that were to be given to teams would be based on process, not on per piece manufacturing. So, previously it was, the decision of how much money was being given to various teams were, based on how much they were producing. But now, they decided to shift that, and they said, look, it really should not depend on how much they're producing in number of goods. Instead, it should depend on the process and how difficult the process is. So resources should be given based on the process, not on how many goods are being manufactured. And finally, they decided that they wanted to shift. They wanted to have multi-skilled workers. And they wanted multi-skilled workers from the start to the finish to make goods. So previously, every employee had just had one particular task. Now employees were expected to have they expected to be multi-skilled and be able to build product from start to finish. So kind of a holistic viewpoint for all of employees. Now, in order to kick off basically this whole world-class manufacturing program, Honeywell did something, a few interesting things. First of all, in 1990, they decided to shut their factory down for 6 hours. And they decided to give all of their employees a training session. And they told their employees that, look, there will be some radical changes that are going to be needed in the organization to fix the organization. So really it was, all of this was done to really bring the employees into a change, a frame of mind, and really make them understand that change is inevitable and there will be some very big changes happening in the organization. So to start off with, at Honeywell, they, the management, as part of the world-class manufacturing, decided to take 4 main actions. The first one was they began to pay for performance and not salaries in factories. Now, this was something huge. So basically what they did was, in effect, instead of giving salaries, they said that they would pay according to performance. So whoever is performing better or performing more is going to be paid more. It would not be a fixed salary. As soon as they implemented this, the defect rate went down by 70%. Customer rejections of their goods went down by 57%. Cycle time went down by 72%. Lead time decreased by 70%, and inventory investment decreased by 46%. So there was a huge improvement by doing this. Again, the first step, just to repeat, was that they were now not paying fixed salaries, they were paying by performance. So the good performing employees were being paid a lot more. And the whole idea behind this was to incentivize people to perform better. The second big thing that happened was elimination of white spaces. So basically, previously, people were kind of just working in silos. They would just focus on their job and they would not really care about what's happening in the rest of the organization. Now, this was causing a lot of gaps between different links in the supply chain, because what was happening is everybody was just not helping each other out. Everybody was just focused on what they had to do. So what the director of strategic planning did was he took three team managers aside and he told them that they were responsible for the whole product line, and performance of their performance will be evaluated on how the entire product line was doing. So again, this was done, basically to change the perspective of people and to make them realize that, look, everybody is working towards the final product being good. And it shouldn't be that everybody's working in silos. And what silos basically means is, just imagine somebody, it's like a horse, for example, right? Sometimes you'll see that they have these, they're kind of not blindfolded, but they're not allowed to look left and right. They kind of had these blinders on their left side and right side of their face, the horse's face. And so that's basically like, the horse can't see the entire point view. They're only being able to see a certain perspective. That's kind of like working in a silo. You're just working in kind of isolation. You're just focusing on what you have to do. So that's not a good strategy if you want, because that's not really promoting teamwork, right? And that's not really helping the overall performance of the organization. Another thing that Honeywell did was they changed the landscape. And so they actually decided to move. And they moved to a beautifully landscaped new site. And the whole site, the new factory, was based on, a fact of how easy it is to work there, how easy it is, for the flow of goods throughout the organization. And so the products could easily flow through the organization, information could flow through the organization, and this really helped them transition from a push system to a more pull system that was triggered by customer orders. And you guys, by this time, we've discussed just-in-time inventory. And there is this whole idea where companies would rather have a pull system where they get an order, then they get the inventory required for the order, and that's that, rather than just sort of making, following a push strategy where they have tons of inventory lying around and they make goods and then they push it out, hoping that they sell, but not knowing for sure. So again, changing to a new landscape site really helped Honeywell in a big way. And finally, they also made in a whole world-class manufacturing program office. And as part of this office, they really focused on relationship management. And the relationship management that they focused on was with their suppliers. So rather than looking at suppliers as an anti-party or somebody that they're having to pay, they decided to look at them almost like partners. And they developed a supplier alliance program, and several things along those lines. They also, in this department, focused on quality programs. They implemented an ISO 9000 certification that the organization got, and the whole idea was that this office would help the organization focus on continuous improvement. So this was a huge value addition. And so these four things were the first things that, Honeywell did in order to change. So they first brought everybody together, explained what's going to happen, and then they implemented these four changes, and that had a very good impact. Now, originally, you know, there was the world-class manufacturing world-class manufacturing was kind of this big umbrella, and they were doing, as I mentioned in the previous slide, though, they were doing several things. They were developing supplier alliance programs, getting certifications, focusing on quality, continuous improvement, all of these things. But one of the key initiatives that the world-class manufacturing umbrella, under the umbrella of world-class manufacturing, that was rolled out was a program known as Total Plant. And this program's mission was to unify business and control information to enable customer satisfaction. So again, a lot of information collection, business-wise, control information, and the whole idea of collecting all this information was to enable customer satisfaction. They also, another initiative was, to now to migrate plant to uh, integrated hardware and software services that support plant management, facilitated planning, implementation, and world-class apps. So again, the whole idea was that they wanted to shift towards integrated hardware and software services. So better, basically, hardware and software services that helped them perform better. So number one, a lot of collection of information. Number two, better hardware and software services. Finally, they wanted to support global delivery of manufacturing products and services to up to 40 different regions. So, these were kind of the missions of this Total Plant. Um, Now, moving forward, this if you look at business process reengineering, there are, I kind of mentioned this earlier on in the case study, but I'm going to talk about it a little bit more over here as well, because as part under the whole umbrella of the Total Plant program, the organization did decide to do business process reengineering. So that's why I'm talking to you a little bit about it right now. Now, in business process reengineering, there are a couple of things that are very important. You need to have top management support. You should have a systematic methodology of doing business process reengineering. It has to be well thought out. It has to be planned. You can't just do it in a haphazard way. And the organizational structure should be such that really rewards process thinking, because this whole business process reengineering, it means that people in the organization should be focusing on how to continuously improve the process. And so that's what the whole organizational structure should really promote. Finally, there should be a desire amongst employees to change and improve instead of keeping things just the way they are. Many employees have this idea of keeping things just the way they are and that they don't want to change. So that you can't have that frame of mind if you want to do business process reengineering. And look, this is a very powerful tool, business process reengineering, and big manufacturing companies such as Caterpillar have saved up to 10 to 20 million in 5 years thanks to business process reengineering. It really is used to, it helps with systematic problem solving, developing cross-functional teams, helping empower employees, and it helps rally people along the way. So there are many benefits of business process reengineering, but you just have to make sure it's done in the right way. So generally what happens is that, employees resist change. And so when the world-class, as part of the world-class manufacturing program, the total plant paradigm, the total plant program was being rolled out, one of the big questions was, okay, well, how do we convince employees that that change is needed? Senior management bought into it. They realized that change was needed, but how would they really convince employees that change was needed in the organization? So what they did was that they decided to take send some of their key people to one of their competitors, HP, Hewlett Packard, and send them to that organization to see what's happening. Um, and when the key people came back, they were a little depressed because they realized that what was happening in Hewlett Packard, HP, was much better than what was happening at Honeywell. Sometimes it takes people witnessing something better to understand the need to improve. When they went through this experience, they developed this need to improve, and they wanted to beat competition. And this became a very key foundation for Honeywell to work with, because now that they had developed this dissatisfaction or the need to improve in their employees, their lives started becoming a lot easier, because employees were convinced that they wanted to change. So they then, after doing that, they started this whole business process reengineering. And as when you do business process reengineering, the first thing is you have to model how the business processes are currently working. And you have to see how they are working across functional boundaries. So there are many things, many functions that require in an organization that require not one, but two or three different departments to work together. So it's important to really understand that. Once you have a very good business process map, this creates a great common language for dealing with changes because it's on paper. Everybody can see what the business process is. It's not a question mark. And this becomes a great, kind of a common ground for people to discuss the processes. And the great benefit of having a business process map is that employees can actually see how the business process is working. It's not just talking about it, but they can actually see it visually. In order to do business process mapping, usually, and it is very important to have an experienced facilitator to come in and to brainstorm. You bring in all the key people in a room, key people of a certain process that are involved in a certain process in a room. There's an experienced facilitator. They brainstorm and they learn really how to discover, and they do a lot of inquiries and they do a lot of brainstorming, and then they develop a business process map. It is important, while the whole training of business process reengineering is happening from the facilitator, that the facilitator explains that the whole objective of doing business process mapping is to optimize the whole system. It's not just optimizing one department, but the focus or the end objective is to optimize the whole system. And so therefore, that's why process thinking is extremely important. Three principles that are needed while you're doing business process mapping is, number one, you should be in the brainstorming. It should be non-blaming, non-judgmental. There should be focus should be on the process and results. And it's very important to always think of the big picture. Okay. So again, process thinking, that's what people really need to really be focused on, process thinking. The case study talks a lot about, this particular visual. And this is the story of the blind man and elephants. And so basically 5 people were blindfolded, and they were asked to touch various parts of the elephant. And so whoever held the trunk of the elephant said, they thought it was, I don't know, a snake. The whoever held the leg thought it was maybe a tree trunk. So everybody was thinking of it differently. They had a different perception because they were blindfolded. And this is what happens when people work in silos. Therefore, it's very important to take the blinds off, everybody sees the whole big picture. They must understand the whole system. And once they do that, then business process mapping becomes a lot more effective, because everybody is really understanding the whole process and they are not just thinking about themselves or their own silos. They are looking at the big picture, the strategic picture, and how to maximize the end results. Okay, so next I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how process mapping happened at Honeywell, and all the various steps that were taken. So the first step of business process mapping that was done as Honeywell was selection of process. And so not every process can be re-engineered or mapped out. So they really, the first step is identification of what are the critical key processes. And then once those processors were identified, really understanding what are the list of products, everything involved in that process, right? So who are the customers of that product? Who are what are the products that are coming out of this process? Um, and in order to do this, sometimes this required interviewing, even customers, interviewing people within the organization, and a lot of data analysis to really understand what the critical process was, or everything that was involved in the critical process. Next was identification of boundaries. So this was what is the raw material that was, this involved understanding what was the raw material that was going into the process and what was the finished good or the output that was coming out of the process. Next, the next step was getting a cross-functional representation, every organization contributing to the process. So again, you wanted to list out, get as much information about the process map as possible. So for the process, really understanding what were the other functions within the organization that were, overlapping or interacting with this particular process. So really getting a cross-functional kind of a view. Next is developing an as-is map for the product and information. And you don't want to make it too broad or too narrow. So it has to be enough information, but obviously not an overload of information. For each step of the process, then it was important to identify the cycle time. The average time and the range was measured for every single step in the process. This involved travel time, measuring the travel time, measuring the time to do every single step. Next is, identification of opportunities for improvement of the process. And great way to start off is think about those opportunities for improvement that don't necessarily add cost. Examples are eliminate waste, parallel work, less decision points. So kind of looking for ways to improve the process by looking at how these could perhaps be implemented. Next, a should be map is made after, incorporating the improvements. And it takes time, this entire process takes time. Mapping the process and especially developing a should be map it takes time. But this is very important because this becomes the roadmap for the future. And this lays out the groundwork, strategic groundwork of how the organization wants to move forward and how the processes should be further improved. Finally, the last step is process implementation. The should be map is actually implemented. And there is a lot of priority given to the new process, implementation of the new process. And also it is made very clear how the new process is impacting quality and reducing time. So this is extremely important because once the new process is implemented, the results of it also need to be made crystal clear so that people continue to work in this direction. So as part of the total plant paradigm or program, definitely business process reengineering was one of the big initiatives that was taken. But another big initiative that was taken was fail-safing. And this involved really identification of defects in the organization, doing a root cause analysis, and generating solutions. And this, the hope was to make the organization defect free by doing a lot of fail safing. Now, we have studied, PDCA, and also, how to do root cause analysis. So a lot of those tools were being implemented at Honeywell. So let me start off with telling you about how they were doing fail safing. The first thing was they were identifying defects throughout the organization. And then when the defect was happening, they would go close to where the defect was happening and get a lot of data. And then they would analyze the data to try and understand what is the problem, and they would use things such as the Pareto tool, where they say that 20% of the causes lead to 80% of the effects. So they were using a lot of various tools, data tools, to try and understand what's going on, identify why the defects were happening. And the next step, they were doing a root cause analysis of the problem. And they were looking at the process map. They were doing interviews, a lot of different things. And in order to do the root cause analysis, they were also using tools such as the 5 whys to really understand what is the actual cause of the problem. um, in general, root causes have three characteristics. They are the cause of the effect. The root cause is also always something that can be changed, that can be fixed. And root causes, if you eliminate the root cause, then the defect will finish or decrease. So after they identified the defect, they did the root cause analysis. The next thing they would do is generate alternate solutions. They would brainstorm, okay, this is the root cause. Now we understand it. Well, how can we fix it? What is the best way to fix this root cause? And in order to do this, they would do brainstorming and really try and generate a lot of solutions and then pick the best solution, which is step 4, evaluate and pick the best solution. And they would check the time, ease, and cost to implement this solution. Next, they would implement the solution on a small scale, check it out. If done, if it was having, good results, then it would be rolled out throughout the organization. This is where the whole PDCA cycle comes in. And basically, when implementation of the plan is happening, everybody affected by the plan is identified and they are told exactly what they have to do differently. Um, and so the next step is basically implementing, so first was the implementation plan and letting everybody know. And then the next step, step 6, is actually doing the plan, implementing the plan, or putting the plan in action and evaluating it. Next is checking it, and finally is rolling it out. If the change is positive and if everything is going well, then rolling it out on a larger scale and sort of, which is act, right? And then working towards continuous improvement. So it's not that once you do fail safing, that's it. No, the organization constantly wants to be looking for other defects that may be happening and trying to use the same fail safing methodology to solve them. Couple of other things that Honeywell did as part of the total plant paradigm program was focus on teamwork. And in order to do this, they realized that workers needed to feel that they work in an environment that is conducive to teams. So, rather than having everybody kind of compete to outshine the other person, They wanted for employees to feel kind of a team spirit. And under everybody should, they wanted to make sure that employees understand exactly what their roles and responsibilities were, but also make them, feel empowered and trusted and respected, and really encourage creativity and risk taking and innovation. Also, as part of this initiative, a lot of cross training was done, and people were really, it was a lot of emphasis was uh, put on, making people work as a team. And this was one of the biggest challenges, right? The organization realized that in order to succeed, this was extremely important, because they really wanted to take people out of this whole siloed, competitive frame of mind to a more, team oriented frame of mind. Next, communication skills. A lot of emphasis was put on effective communication skills throughout the organization. Employees were taught, conflict management, how to deal with conflicts in a positive way. Communication skills were focused on. There was a lot of role playing about how to deal with conflicts and how to deal with how to resolve conflicts. Also, if you have to confront people, how do you do it? And so the whole idea was to explain that, you can confront people, but it should be done in a non-blameful way, avoid becoming personal, avoid command and control, encourage value-added thinking, creativity, and teamwork. So really, even if you do have, there, you are faced with a situation that requires confrontation, there is a way to do it, and that way was explained. Also, people were given stretch goals, and this really changed the way people were doing things. So people were given a normal goal, and they were also given a stretch goal, which was a very high goal. And if they obviously were able to achieve their stretch goal, then they were rewarded accordingly. So, in order to do, all of these huge changes, the first thing was the whole execution of change. Several things had to fall in place. Number one, the total plant paradigm, the four big things that we just discussed, starting from business process reengineering to fail-safing, to teamwork, effective communication skills, that had to be planned out. Next, senior management had to dedicate resources and training, offer training and educate people. So it was very important to have the top management buy-in. Also, management had to change their way of managing people from an autocratic way to a more facilitative way. So rather than just saying, do this, do that, they needed to learn to empower their employees and how to facilitate them, to encourage them to really succeed. Also, they needed to learn how to reward enterprise value added activities in the organization. So really focusing, not just saying, look, these are menial people doing menial jobs, not important jobs. We are the decision makers. They needed to get out of that and really focus on rewarding people for adding value, for doing value added activities throughout the organization. There are important things that are needed. Your vision statement of any organization should reflect the desired outcome of where they want, what is it that they really want to do. And also, if anybody wants to bring about change in an organization, they must have a strategic plan with specific steps, policies, steps to implement the change. You can't just do change management just on the cuff. It does not work. And also, top management must be active participants in change. And a lot of training should be done. So, again, before you ask more from employees and ask them to change, you must give them training and reward them for the value that they're bringing. It's important to also remember and that middle management resists change the most. So it's important to focus on them when you are wanting to bring about change in an organization and to really get their buy-in. And we saw how Honeywell did this by really sending their employees to HP. So again, very important to get the buy-in of the organization when you are executing change. Finally, the last thing in this case study is talking a lot about the lessons learned from this entire activity at Honeywell. And obviously, there were amazing results of doing all of these changes. This is a case study because these changes brought around terrific changes in Honeywell. And so these are some of the lessons learned. Number one, people are enablers of change. When you're looking at just making process maps, that is the blueprint or the architecture for change, but the people are the ones who will make those changes possible. And it's very important when you are doing business process reengineering to have a systematic method of doing mapping processes. Next, if you want to change, you want to create a change, question everything. Everybody in the organization should be focused on questioning why they are doing what they're doing and can it be improved in a certain way. It's important to have a systematic method to map processes in an organization. Without that, it is very difficult to bring change or to really understand what is happening in the organization. Very important to map processes. 4, create team ownership and a culture of dissatisfaction. Generally speaking, employees do not like to take ownership. They just like to do their own work and they say they want to do the minimum amount of work and that's about it. It is very important for you to maybe even create their salaries or their job performance metrics to measure, create this ownership within them of the entire team of how the organization is doing overall. And it's also very important to create a culture of dissatisfaction. If everybody is just satisfied in the job that they're doing, they will not be motivated to do more. It's also important to have a bottoms up or empowered implementation kind of culture. So you want to empower your employees so that they implement change. You do not want to have an autocratic kind of a culture. They need to own changes, or employees need to own changes and implement them. Business process reengineering must be business driven and continuous. It shouldn't just be that you do business process reengineering once and you forget about it. The idea is to continuously be changing for the better. And when you do business process reengineering, it must be aligned with the business objective. And there should be no attitude of, oh, I've arrived, I'm done. You're never done. There's always room for improvement. Another key thing to remember is that IT or information technology in any organization is necessary, but not sufficient enabler. IT's function is to support business. It's important to remember that they are in it, they help the business achieve their goals. That is what their role is. It's good to give employees stretch goals, not so that they feel that motivated to do more than just what's easily within reach. Execution determines success or failure. You could have the best plan in place, the best should be map in place, but if the execution is not done well, it will either determine, it will fail. If the execution is done very well, it will succeed. So execution is key. And the last thing is management attitude and behavior can squash projects. So this is extremely important. Management must have an enabling point of view, and that should be the culture. So again, they should really promote change. They should not squash projects. They should promote change, positive change throughout the organization. And with that, I come to the end of this case study. I hope you enjoyed it and you learned it. You learned a lot. This is a fantastic case study because we got to see the implementation of business process reengineering. We got to see the implementation of PDCA. We got to see tools such as 5 Whys that were used in the organization. And we also got to see, how powerful these kind of tools can be. So with that, thank you very much, and I hope to speak to you again soon. Take care.